Good morning. Hello and welcome to Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena. Welcome to all members, friends, and guests here in person and virtually. Neighborhood Church creates and grows an inclusive community of faith connected by love, spirit, and service. My name is Andy Eaton, and I'm a member of your Board of Trustees. Today's service is led by our interim minister, Reverend Dr. Carissa Cooley, along with our music director, Dr. Zenaida Robles, accompanist Wells Lang, our talented staff musicians, soloists, and choir. Please silence your devices as we begin our service. Thank you for joining us as we continue to prioritize connection over perfection in this hybrid service, which is streamed on YouTube and which we are recording for future viewing. Seating is available in the back for those who want to be sure not to appear in the recording. We'll continuously learn and adapt to create joyful opportunities to be together while keeping our community safe. As we approach Thanksgiving, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church of Pasadena acknowledges that its campus is located on the traditional land of the Gabrielino Tongva people who've been present on this land for time immemorial. We recognize that a land acknowledgement such as this is made meaningful by a commitment to act on this knowledge. We're new to this. We first commit to developing a deeper understanding of the history, culture, and present-day challenges of the Tongva, with the goal of ultimately making a more significant commitment to relationship and support of the community of peoples living here on this land long before the creation of our church. Neighborhood Church upholds a covenant of right relations through which we commit to act so that the needs of the individual and the greater faith community can be in harmony. We covenant to honor one another, engage one another, and give to one another and our institution. I'd like to share part of that covenant. We commit to sharing our authentic selves by expressing our needs and ideas, communicating honestly, respectfully, directly, courageously, and without anonymous statements. We take responsibility for the impact of our statements and actions. We remain engaged, even in conflict, through daring and difficult communication, collaboration, and facilitation. I also have a very important announcement. We're holding a pie and cake sale after services today. Hopefully most of you saw some of those pies and cakes on your way in, to raise money for the Youth Religious Education Program. It's pay what you will, and we just know that when you see all the wonderful items, you'll want to pay a lot. And there's a silent auction for a very special cake baked by Reverend Teresa itself. But please don't overbid me. Again, welcome to Neighborhood Church, whoever you are and wherever you are in your spiritual journey. Welcome to this inclusive faith community connected by love, spirit, and service.
morning. So lovely to see you all here this morning. Our invocation comes from a collaborative poem that was written by members of the Interfaith Youth Corps, and it's called The Eye of the Storm. We are allowed space for uncertainty in the quiet. Sunlight and rainbows are bound to shy their way out. We are allowed space for joy. Whether you believe we're a bunch of accidents or purposes, we are meant to be grounded. We are meant to define our own peace. Come, let us worship together.
Our opening hymn is number 355 in your gray hymnal. Will you please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing, "We Lift Our Hearts in Thanks."
And I'm back. Each Sunday, our congregation expands our impact by dedicating 100% of contributions to a local social justice organization through our Share the Plate project. This week and next, the Share the Plate offertory will go to Camp de Benneville Pines' 60 Years of Love end-of-year campaign. A new group of loving camp supporters, aka heroes, have banded together to create a challenge campaign to help the camp meet its ongoing financial needs and to celebrate this auspicious 60th anniversary. They've pledged to match up to $175,000 between now and December 31st. This means your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $175,000. There's no better anniversary present for camp than to reach this $350,000 goal. Janet James, camp director for many, many years, lost her husband Bob to COVID earlier this year, and gifts to camp will help us honor Bob's memory and his support of Janet's contributions to the camp for so many years. So please give generously.
Our prayer this morning comes from the incumbent poet laureate, Joy Harjo, who is the first Native American to have held that position. This is called Eagle Prayer. So let us join in the spirit of prayer, a meditation. Let us ground our bodies and open our spirits. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments steadily growing and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky and wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe out, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like eagle rounding out the morning inside us. We pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Amen. Many of us come to services today with someone on our minds or hearts, someone beloved, perhaps someone who has passed, or someone who is struggling, or someone who is celebrating. And so we want to take this moment to bring these people virtually into our space. And if you're online, feel free to write them in the chat. So let us hold them in the hearts and in the love of this community. Amen. Our reading this morning comes from a book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer. Imagine raising children in a culture in which gratitude is the first priority. Frida Jacques works at the Onondaga Nation School. She's a clan mother, the school community liaison, and a generous teacher. She explains to me that the Thanksgiving address that they speak in the school at the beginning of each week and at the end of each week embodies the Onondaga relationship with the world. Each part of creation is thanked in turn for fulfilling its creator-given duty to others. It reminds you every day that you have enough, more than enough. Everything needed to sustain life is here already. When we do this every day, it leads us to an outlook of contentment and respect for all of creation. And now we will enjoy a video from Lily June, who is a Navajo Cherokee poet and activist.
Indigenous people, shine your light, we are equal. I remember the days when our prayers were illegal. I remember the days when being Indian was lethal. Yeah, we had a rough past, but get ready for the sequel. Get ready for the glorious comeback of our people. Oh, yeah. Rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up, wake up. All nations rise. Rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. All nations rise, rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. With forgiveness as my bow and my prayers as my arrows, pull them back and let go. I watch them fly like sparrows. Have hope. Yeah, have hope. With compassion as my shield and faith down to my marrow, I will walk the pollen path even when it gets narrow. Yeah, yeah, I resurrect. Yes, you can bet that we seen the single mama raising children on the res. We seen domestic violence tear apart what we have left. We seen the alcohol take it all and leave us dead. We seen the children take their lives when they can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. Can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. No, we can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. No, we can't take the dread anymore. It's a war, but we've seen it all before. And now we know we can change it, 'cause that's why we were born. We know we are the ones that we have been waiting for. We are the ones Grandma has been praying for. So rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up, wake up. Pueblo hermoso, levántense, es nuestro tiempo. No tienes que esconderte más. Ahora es nuestro tiempo. Mujer indígena, tú eres tan sagrada. Traigas medicina de tu suelo todavía. A pesar del abuso de tu cuerpo y tu tierra, respetamos tus ancestros y la suya cultura. Hombre indígena, Tú eres honorable y yo veo la fuerza que todavía sobrevive a pesar del abuso de tu raza venerable. Yo respeto tus ritos, tus danzas, tus padres. Somos guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz y no vamos a escondernos más. Somos guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz y no vamos a escondernos más. All nations
They say that history is written by the victors.
rise up, 'cause
But how can there be a victor when the war
we
isn't
don't
over?
have to
The
hide
battle has only just begun,
anymore.
and Creator is sending His very best warriors.
All nations
And this time, it isn't Indians versus cowboys. No, this time, it is all the beautiful races of humanity together on the same side, and we are fighting to replace our fear with love. And this time, bullets, arrows, and cannonballs won't save us. The only weapons that are useful in this battle are the weapons of truth, faith, and compassion.
Very inspiring. So a few Sundays ago in my sermon, I mentioned that I had done my ministerial internship in Duxbury, Massachusetts at the First Parish Church. As I said then, Duxbury is the second settled community by the Pilgrims who first settled across the bay in Plymouth. The settler who founded the Duxbury community was a man named John Alden. And so John Alden is much celebrated in Duxbury to this day, all of these centuries later. In fact, there's an entire worldwide organization of the descendants of John Alden. And after that many centuries, you can imagine there's a lot of them. So every year on something that they call Remembrance Day, they descend upon Duxbury to hold their annual meeting and elect their officers. You wouldn't think that being an officer of the John Alden Society would be that important to people, but you would be wrong. These elections are hard fought, with people printing election brochures and positional broadsides. And so since the church that I served was the First Parish in Duxbury, many of these folks would come to church on that Sunday and stand outside passing out their literature. They would also come in their pilgrim costumes. The men with buckled shoes and breeches, white cuffs and collars. The women would wear the long skirts and the aprons and the white shawls. One of the descendants of John Alden was a well-respected member of both the family and the church. But he went out of the bounds of the John Alden clan and married a working-class Italian girl from Boston. By the time I knew her, she was in her 80s. But she loved to poke fun at the Alden traditions. She would come to church with her pilgrim dress on, but also with the brightest red lipstick you have ever seen. And in the receiving line, she would delight in raising her skirts and showing me the red lace pantaloons that she wore underneath. Not a sight you usually can forget easily. So given all of this falderall, I never really bought into the romantic myth of Thanksgiving. In fact, I remember the first time I visited Plymouth Rock, on which the first pilgrim ship supposedly landed, and I envisioned something immense, but it was really kind of a small boulder about this size with an observational shed built around it. And as I peered down, I saw that someone had thrown a dirty athletic sock on top of it. Again, not a romantic vision. And as I learned more and more about what actually happened when the Pilgrims first settled, their abuse and manipulation of the Wampanoag people, the diseases that they brought, which decimated the native clans, and the wholesale massacre they wrought just years after the supposedly idyllic Thanksgiving dinner. I became even less enchanted and, in fact, outraged and appalled at how much the myth of that first Thanksgiving perpetuates. I recently heard a descendant of the Wampanoag talk about Thanksgiving. He said, "I don't want to take Thanksgiving away from people, but I want them to know the true story. Despite all that my people suffered, we still celebrate Thanksgiving, but not how the colonizers do. We celebrate just as my ancestors did, a Thanksgiving at the turn of every cycle of the moon, 13 times a year. And that Thanksgiving asked us to be aware of the manifold and manifest gifts that nature still holds all around us." And of course, we know that the colonization did not end in the 17th century. It has perpetuated over the centuries and decades, not just in violence and oppression enacted against Native people's bodies, but also in an oppression of the mind, all of our minds, with a mindset that still predominates, which asserts that the Western Christian settlers were somehow superior in every way to those they conquered. This is not just a political perspective, it was in fact deeply theological. A papal encyclical in the 14th century urged Christians to go to the colonies and bring God to the infidels. This attitude persisted not just in conservative religious groups, but indeed in prominent Unitarian and Universalist leaders and judges through at least the 19th century. And they believed they were acting with compassion when they took the native culture away from their children. So as I talked about last week, it's important that we acknowledge these uncomfortable parts of our history and unpack how they may still be influencing us today. I could rehearse many of the dreadful stories and the dreadful impact, but I think most of you in the room already know all of this. So what I'd like to do instead is to think about how do we move forward from these recognitions with some modicum of hope and courage. I've been captivated recently by some young faith leaders who call themselves radical misfits. They're misfits in the sense that they are on the periphery of their faith traditions. They are brutally honest about the legacy of those traditions, but they also want to stay in their traditions in a way which does not deny, but acknowledges and builds toward a different kind of future. One of these leaders is the Reverend Jen Bailey, an African-American Methodist evangelical pastor who lives her religious life as an activist and a community builder. She recently published a beautiful book of letters in which she gives tribute to her ancestors as well as reaching out to new generations. In one of these letters, she addresses herself to a community of fellow spiritual misfits. She says, as misfits who were pushed to the edge and in between places, we were able to see what is on the horizon and collectively discern what is needed to meet the challenges ahead. We are called to be the gardeners who will compost and tend to the soil upon which the future generations will sow seeds that will one day blossom. So I love this concept, the idea of not avoiding the mistakes of the past or becoming overwhelmed or enervated by them, but treating them as compost, which creates a new kind of soil on which we can build. She invokes one of my favorite poets and activists, Adrienne Marie Brown, who says, "Things are not getting worse, they are getting uncovered." We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. It is easy to get lost in hopelessness and cynicism when we have to face the myriad oppressions of the past and the present. But reading about these young people and their unbounded resilience makes me take heart. Indeed, Jen Bailey says that to get lost in cynicism is in fact spiritual laziness. Or to shift to another activist who also gives me courage, the lawyer Brian Stevenson, who says this: "I believe that hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. The reckoning that has to happen in this country has to be rooted in a moral awareness, a moral awakening, a consciousness that evolves in a way that we begin to do the things that we must do if we're going to not only save the country, but ourselves." He continues, "That's the reason why we ought to find the courage to acknowledge the wrongfulness of those things so that we can then embrace what is right, what's corrective, what's redemptive, what's restorative." Or as Lily June said in our video, we are called. It is all the beautiful races of humanity together on the same side, and we are fighting to replace our fear with love. The only weapons that are useful in this battle are the weapons of truth, faith, and compassion. So this is what helps me get off the floor of my despair, when I can see a set of positive steps that we can take, even if they're small, that helps create a different kind of world. And Brian Stevenson gives us a 4-point program to do just that. First, to stay proximate to those whom you want to help. Not in a way that makes you the all-knowing hero, but in fact, he means staying proximate so that we can learn from those who have been denied a voice. He quotes his grandmother, who said to him, you can't understand the most important things from a distance. You have to get close." The second, to fight back against the narratives that have created injustice, like the Thanksgiving myth. To stand firm in calling for a more complex story, a more complete story, in classrooms, in the media, even in our everyday conversations with family and friends, maybe over the Thanksgiving table. Third, to stay hopeful and remember that your hope is your superpower. He says you're either hopeful or you're the problem. There is no neutral place. If I've inherited anything from the generation who came before me, I've inherited their wisdom about the necessity of hope. And finally, to be willing to do inconvenient and uncomfortable things. We will not get where we need to go by expecting that it will be easy or the path without any pitfalls. And to Brian's list, I would add a few others, pieces of wisdom that I've learned from some of these young activists that I've been engaging with. One is the necessity of shared and compassionate leadership. We need to break down the myth that change will happen because some great leader will make it happen for us. We are called to participate. We are called to listen to and to tend to one another. Jen Bailey says there's an increasing demand for ways of being and grounding practices that center the full humanity of the practitioners, body, mind, and soul. This desire stretches beyond frameworks of self-care to a more radically imagined a communal care model that centers the holistic well-being of both the individual and the community. This is why the spiritual practices that we engage in this community help sustain us for the justice work to do. I've been brokenhearted recently by hearing stories about young climate activists who are so devastated by the reality of climate change and the resistance of the powers that be to make changes that they actually take their own lives. We must share their burden. We must take up their cause. We must offer care to them to help save this generation of people. And finally, in the spirit of Thanksgiving that I would like to celebrate, to hold up the simple necessity for gratitude. A gratitude that is not transactional, but existential, a way of being in the world. We can learn from other cultures like the Chinese who use the phrase "zai tian," which literally means thank sky, as a way to express gratitude to all things under the sky. Or the Taiwanese who say kam sim, which means feel heart, to express gratitude. In complimenting a good deed, the word is also meant to highlight how good deeds not only benefit the person receiving them, but everyone who observes that good deed, making it a communal act. As I mentioned in the reading, the Onondaga people begin and end each week by speaking a Thanksgiving prayer known as the words that come before all else. We now turn our thoughts to the Creator or Great Spirit and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. Now our minds are one. The Onondaga. So I've been asking myself, and I encourage you to take on gratitude as a spiritual discipline that does not depend on things going just as I want them to, but a way of being in the world that finds and recognizes the abundant gifts that are always before us if we could but open our eyes to see. So let us thank Sky for these abundant gifts. Let us feel heart when we witness all the good that so many of you bring to this community, and that in turn we offer to the world. Let us turn our hearts to the Creator and send thanks for all the gifts of creation. May such gratitude sustain us in our need for hope and for courage. A hope and courage that will, I believe, eventually heal the world. And now our minds are one. Amen.
Our closing hymn is number 21 in your gray hymnal. Will you please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing "For the Beauty of the Earth"?
Stars, for
want to, while we're in a spirit of gratitude, offer my thanks to the choir. I don't think we recognize you enough. You're so fantastic. Thank you for your service. Our benediction comes from Laura Martin, the Reverend Laura Martin, who is a UCC pastor as well as a wonderful poet. Walk by faith and by sight. Know you get both the unseen and all that you hold in your hands. So walk by trust and by uncovering. Walk by marveling in the finite and the infinite. Walk by saying yes to the morning light, however she lands at your feet. Walk by having faith in all that grows from roots or stems or branches, or in you after you have done the hard work. Walk by memory of those who stood near when you took your first steps, and by hope for all those who will touch the earth in 7 generations. Walk by visions remembered and grace received. Walk by alleluias said under stars, by grandparents who showed you where to find honey, by the thrill of music today. Walk by sight, which lets you keep the faith. Amen. Go in peace. I look forward to greeting you all outside in whatever way you are comfortable.